While Treyarch is busy fixing weapons from its previous games ported over in its newest title locked behind a paywall or grind wall, and Infinity Ward is revealing a Gunsmith trailer for Modern Warfare, no, not that one with the 4 or the remastered version, that's worse than the incarnation showed by Treyarch 4 years ago with Black Ops 3, Sledgehammer Games just released 7 brand new guns yesterday after releasing 5 back in June. Now, these weapons are currently available in RNG crates only, however, similar to the previous update, contracts to earn specific weapons from this drop will be available a month later. Yes, there have been games in the past which have released new weapons after its life cycle has concluded, like Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3. However, unlike what Call of Duty World War II is doing with the contract system, there was no way to directly obtain these new beepity bops. They were always put in supply drops only, which is anti-consumer and a pathetic cash grab for a game that's already run its course, and most are on to the next one. I mean, seriously, is Activision actually getting tons of revenue from old Call of Duty games in the form of microtransactions and DLC pack purchases, aside from Zombies Chronicles and Black Ops 3, because there's nothing like paying for maps that you already paid for in the past a second or third time to cash in on the minimal type of effort we come to expect from Call of Duty developers. No wonder why Treyarch's microtransaction system Black Ops 4 is the most egregious filament of them, given what they were able to get away with in the past. Anyways, I'd be willing to wager that the answer to my question is no, because who in their right mind is going to buy a season pass or DLC pack or even supply drops to unlock new content for a game that's out of its life cycle when there's not as many people playing it, and even less that have the additional DLC that artificially fractures the player base into the haves and have-nots. With the exception of maybe Black Ops 2, because there were so many people that played that game and bought the DLCs such that the population is probably large enough to sustain it. Even if you did purchase the DLC for Call of Duty games, when that life cycle is over, you always had to disable or uninstall the DLC in order to even find a match in the first place, because there aren't many people with all the DLC still playing that game, thus your smaller matchmaking circle is almost non-existent. It's why I've always advocated for making at least map packs and DLC free for all players once the next Call of Duty game is released. This way the people that did pay for the season pass actually got to play the content that they paid for in perpetuity, with their money going towards timed exclusivity, meaning they got to play on the maps for a much longer time than those that get it for free at the end of the game's life cycle. And it might actually drive up sales of a seasonal pass, given that there's an increased value for the content lasting longer than the minimum 1 year, or in the case of a 4th DLC drop, just a few months. Not to mention, there's an increased interest in getting new content for a game, so you'll keep players engaged even if they're not playing the brand new one, which is what these companies always want anyway. Increase user retention for both marketing and revenue purposes. People are more willing to spend actual money on games that they're playing versus ones that are just collecting dust, and there's always those loot boxes, I mean surprise mechanics, that can be purchased. However, Activision, spelt with a $, can't see the long-term gains for the short-term returns, and attempting to wring every last cent from its player base, so even if it means giving away content for free instead of waiting for some poor douche canoe to pay for it after development support is basically stopped on a game, they'd rather not do the thing that will make them even more money, essentially cutting off their nose to spite their face. So what does this have to do with yesterday's update to Call of Duty World War II? Because there wasn't a map pack release, but weapons and supply drops, which I said nothing about in my prior rant here. Well, there's another part of this update that I like to focus on, which is that all of the collections in the game are now permanently available to obtain instead of being a limited time offering. There are 3 different ways to obtain a particular weapon in Call of Duty World War II. The first being by using the in-game currency to purchase all of the things to play dress up with in an FPS for a particular collection in order to grant you the weapon, not by paying actual cash money with COD points to get a hammer that costs more in game than if you went to a real hardware store. Secondly, if you have the opportunity to complete a challenge in a rotating weekly contract purchasable with in-game credits, of which Sledgehammer Games is now being more transparent about when and what the upcoming contracts will contain, so that this way you could plan out your gaming sesh beforehand. And the worst, I mean third way, is getting them through even more luck by praying to the RNGesus that you get it out of a supply drop. Even though none of the recent weapons are actually tied to a particular collection, thus cannot be directly unlocked with in-game currency as I outlined in the first method, opening up collections permanently is a philosophy which should be employed by future Call of Duty games once their life cycle is over. Prior to this update, these collections would only be available during an event, which all have already passed, and it would only last a month or two before the collection would be closed, and thus necessitating unlocking weapons using the latter 2 methods. Now that they're permanently open, you could use the more consumer-friendly method of gobbling up all the items in a collection like Pac-Man to get the gun that you want, versus waiting around for the right contract or using actual money to purchase supply drops and putting crystals out for good juju like Marianne Williamson. Let's take this philosophy and apply it to the current title, Black Ops 4. Since Call of Duty does what it always always does, take an idea from a more successful title, then remove all of the things that make it good, and just leave in the part where you give them money. The contraband stream that's similar to Fortnite's Battle Pass is essentially Call of Duty World War II's collections without the in-game currency aspect, and instead just a grind wall for limited time content. Since we're in the middle of Operation Apocalypse Z, the shittier version of the Attack of the Undead event, currently the contraband streams for prior operations like First Strike, Absolute Zero, Grand Heist, and Spectre Rising are currently also unavailable, similar to how collections in Call of Duty World War II were unavailable when their limited time event was over. Now that Sledgehammer Games has unlocked all of the collections 9 months or so after the game's life cycle is finished, Treyarch should take some notes from the studio, which is cleaning up after for Call of Duty 2020 when Black Ops 4 is out of its life cycle, which, let's be honest, has already happened a few months ago on PC with the combining of playlists. Not only should the Black Ops Pass maps be given to all players when Modern Warfare drops with my DLC for free mantra I spoke about earlier, but we should also have the ability to progress through all of the contraband streams, whether it be simultaneously since there already exists the means to do so, even in the limited time streams with both operations and events at the same time, or to be able to pick any stream regardless of whether or not it's active and start leveling it up to unlock particular items. Back when I actually played the game before shelving it for months because I just don't enjoy the game, I didn't quite make it up to level 100 in the Operation Absolute Zero to earn the SWAT RFT, and now there's no possible way I can get the weapon, given how watered down the loot pool is in the game, to actually pull it out of a reserve, or worse yet, considering that there's also variants of vanilla weapons and weapon bribes, which should literally only contain non-base weapons. It's one of the main reasons I stopped playing the game, as there's no fucking way I can keep up with the rate at which content is required to be earned in the game without forking over my wallet for a game that I already paid a $60 entry fee for because I want to keep my sanity by playing other games that aren't a chore to get through. So back to my main point. To keep someone like me invested in actually logging in every day to play a game, Treyarch and Activision need to make all contraband streams available for progression when this game's life cycle is over. For people that actually paid to skip tiers or grinded out the game, they would have already had the use of these weapons and content for a long time prior to someone like me who had to wait almost a year later in the case of getting the SWAT RFT in Operation Absolute Zero because I can't get it right now since that operation is over. So by releasing the streams when that life cycle is over, it's not a slight to those that were actually keeping up during when the game itself was active. Sledgehammer Games just set the precedent with their latest update to Call of Duty World War II for not time gating any content when a Call of Duty game is out of its life cycle, and Treyarch needs to follow through on this with Black Ops 4. However, given the long track record of its anti-consumer monetary practices, I'm not holding my breath. Keeping your fans engaged in games when their life cycle is over is a difficult task, but something as simple as removing the restriction on earning prior limited time content is beneficial to everybody involved, as the publisher and developers aren't really going to be making much in revenue in terms of paid content for a stale game, with the players actually wanting to go back and play the game to unlock all of the items that they've missed. Let me know what you think of this idea in the comment section down below. I've been the Schwantz27, off like a bedroom light before sex. Until next time.